Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is WP Watercooler, episode number 261. Today's topic is myths and misperceptions in WordPress. Let's go around this very small room real quick and get everyone introduced. Feel free to tell us, I don't know, tell us about like the first 6 months of your life, or I don't know, like you got some time. Feel free to fill it in.
It all began when I don't want to go there. My mom and my dad met. No, I don't.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian.
Sure. Brian Hogg. I've got a couple free and pro plugins, a couple of video courses, and yeah, I try to debunk myths in WordPress every day. So there you go.
Awesome, man. Well, good to have you on. How about you, Jason Cosper? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Jason Cosper. I am the senior performance engineer over at Liquid Web, and I was born a small black child.
Huh. I love that the audience behind you started laughing. That was awesome. I don't know how that happened, but that was sweet. Sarah, how about you? Tell us a little about yourself.
How many people are going to get that reference, though? So hi, I'm Sarah Weefald. I am a product manager, also sometimes a project manager, also sometimes a WordPress web developer type person. I wear many hats, mainly because I taught myself how to code, and sometimes you do a lot of stuff. So hi. And I started a new job on Monday, so this might be my last water cooler for a while.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, boy.
What?
Oh, boy. We got some big shoes to fill here.
Still WordPress, or?
No, WordPress is going to be my, my thing that I'm still interested in. And, still doing WordCamp Orange County. We started having our meetings about that, which I'm very excited about. We're going to have yet another fantastic year, just getting bigger and better. And still leading the Orange County WordPress design meetup. First Monday of every month.
Sweet.
Thanks for being on with us, Sarah. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog, and you can find all the fun stuff that I'm posting over there. So let's talk a little bit about myths and misperceptions in WordPress. I mean, there has to be a ton of them. You have people that watch YouTube videos. They see all the pre-rolls of the Wixes and the Squarespaces and all the other things that are going on out there, and they're thinking, why would I want to install my own thing? Why would I want to build my own car? You can just go to the store and buy a car. Why would I go through all of this stuff? And that's definitely one of those like myths type things here where, the 5-minute install, and there's all these different ways that we've kind of made sure that WordPress sounds like it's super easy to install and get things going. Obviously that can be the case, but there's also some stuff that you got to deal with down the road as well. So who wants to kind of kick us off a little bit and talk a little bit about that?
Well, I have a little bit of a story.
Ooh. Please do.
If we could maybe start there.
Yeah.
So I was at one point helping somebody with a bunch of WordPress websites. That's actually how I learned how to do the WordPress. Was we didn't have anybody at the office that could make websites, and I was like, well, I kind of learned PHP in school, and there's this meetup that I could go to in Orange County. So how about I try to learn what this thing is, and we'll see what happens. And so we go there, learn how to do it, and everything's going fine for a while. Everybody's websites are in WordPress, and then later somebody tells the boss that the Squarespace thing is really cool and really easy to use. And here's this other like banned website. This guy, like, this is all Squarespace, and it's a fantastic website. So I'm like, okay, totally, I can do a Squarespace website. Like, we'll set it all up. So they're doing the final review of everything, and they're like, well, why doesn't it look like this other website? Because that website's completely custom. Well, but it's Squarespace, right? Yeah. Well, why can't we use this module? Because it's completely custom. Like, it's not available to me. I mean, I could learn JavaScript maybe and try to make you one, but it might take a minute. So I think that sort of encapsulates a lot of people's misconceptions about WordPress. Is, just because something is WordPress or Squarespace or something else like that doesn't mean that your results are going to look exactly like theirs.
Definitely. You can't just pour some tussin on it and make it all better. requires a little bit more effort to kind of make those things happen. So yeah. what ended up in that? I mean, how do you I know you explained to them, hey, you can't do this, but in the long run, was it that they finally realized, oh, we really need to come up with a more custom thing to be able to make this happen, or what?
Yeah, I mean, we made do. I found something that was kind of similar, and we just used that. But yeah, I mean, that seems to be like an expectation that people have going in.
Well, there's a good to riff off expectation. The fact that it's free means
yes.
that everything around it should be free or very low cost. I think that's starting to go away. I think people are starting to realize that there's some effort and some work involved in setting up, essentially a customized WordPress install. But yeah, that's still kind of the common thing. And I think almost people, like, I've gotten probably 4 or 5 different leads this week. Like, I'm not really doing consulting anymore, but it's like, oh, there's a site, it's half finished, like someone designed it and then started building it and then stopped, so it should just, $500, you should be able to finish it, right? I'm like, oh, whoa. There's who knows what customizations they made, who knows what plugins they're using, who knows what they did, right? So
yeah. Yeah, like they might have left the website at like 80% of the way there, but that last 20% could take you 6 months.
Yep. So yeah. So literally, yeah, like 4 or 5 in last week of that level. So I don't know if that's any kind of indication that people jumping ship or realizing that, it's, but I think that's in any industry, that there's a lot of people who are looking for everything for nothing or not for much. But WordPress seems to be pretty prevalent just because it's open source and free for the base thing.
So to dovetail into that, people expect to pay as little as possible. In a lot of cases to work with WordPress. You find a lot of like low-end, cheap hosting accounts. And then another common misconception is that WordPress doesn't scale. That, I throw a little bit of traffic at it and it just falls over. No. Sure, it falls over on your $1.99 a month hosting account.
With your 500 plugins.
Yeah, exactly. And even the and we can get to that in a second, but just the fact that, like, if you throw a lot of traffic at something that is very inexpensively hosted, not using any sort of caching plugins, people will just kind of install and go and throw some plugins into place. Fortunately, some hosts are starting to realize that they need to put some sort of caching into place. But just the fact still remains that there are a lot of kind of cheap and inexpensive lower end hosts that this is a lot of people's first taste into how they host WordPress, and that it just doesn't scale, and that's totally untrue. I mean, you have sites that like large e-commerce sites, large media sites that run off of WordPress like day in and day out. It's just a matter of being able to throw the resources needed at WordPress. And you can actually, in that WordPress speed up group that I mentioned in last week's podcast, there are tons of people in there who really like to show off, like, here, I took this $5 DigitalOcean server, look how much traffic I can throw at it. Like, there is a way, but you're just going to have to get elbows deep in a bunch of code.
It's like couponing, but for server traffic.
Yeah, basically.
Well, I definitely appreciate the likes of Liquid Web saving me from my terrible code, so it's good. Yeah. It's like, oh, the code is inefficient? That's fine. Just pay more for hosting. It's okay. Oh, that's my code? And you want me to make it better? Sorry, can't help you.
Yeah, you definitely, the idea of having good caching set up and also being able to make sure that your code is going to allow for that caching to happen, so it's not constantly breaking the cache. That's probably something else. And when you have somebody who can write a plugin, anyone can write a plugin, but can they write a good plugin? And if they don't write a good plugin that will take care of the things that it needs to take care of, you're heavily leaning on caching in hopes that it doesn't just destroy the MySQL server because it's just constantly checking for stuff, and it's not using transients, not using any of those things. It's just, you know,
so many
just
buzzwords.
And
Exactly.
fortunately, we have the Tide project that XWP has released.
Wait, this isn't like the Tide like eating thing?
No,
That's
no.
sweeping
Not my
the
hair.
nation?
Where's that?
Not eating Tide Pods, but Tide. It is XWP. They're working on making it part of Core, where you can actually see the quality of the plugin you're about to install.
Oh, darn it!
From the install screen. So
that's not good.
It runs some checks against the WordPress coding standards and a few other things, and kind of like gives like an overall code health. And I believe developers will be able to get reports on things that they can fix, stuff like that. That looks really cool, and hopefully it'll be able to, like, a rising tide raises all ships. Hopefully that'll rise the tide considerably.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of something that I feel like I might have talked about on the show a few times before. But you know, the more widely used a piece of technology becomes, the less sophisticated the average user is. Because, like, you know, at the very beginning of something, you have your early adopters who are usually much more technically savvy. You know, they're used to doing a little bit more to, you know, it's part of the culture to be like, okay, I've got to configure this, this, and this, and then I can get the results I want.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, how old is WordPress at this point? I mean, it was that 10-year party was 5 years ago almost, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, WordPress is a very mature product at this point.
And even just in general, right? Like, people think most people have grown up with YouTube being a thing, or so many people have grown up with that being a thing. And then they think, oh, just because it's easy to use and I use it every day, whatever, it's not hard for me to do my own YouTube or, you know, whatever. It's just a good example where people think that because something's easy to use, that it's easy to replicate on your own thing. So like back to your Squarespace point of customization, right?
Yeah,
like just because they see it doesn't mean I could just, it's done.
On a very basic level, you can get it spun up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I got a website for my pro wrestling podcast up in 15 minutes. I think it may have taken longer for DNS to propagate than it took me to get that website.
Well, this is you. Wow, that's quick.
I mean, I used 2017. Like, I'm not crazy.
Okay, good. Let me feel bad here. Yeah.
No. But, you know, it's just one of those things where we have to, you know, be thinking about, like, okay, the average person coming to WordPress at this point has maybe half of the technological knowledge that we may have been used to having in this conversation before.
But even just something basic, like one person in our meetup was like, okay, it's WordPress.com, so that's fine. But still, similar process. And it's like, I want to have a link to my blog in the menu. And you think, okay, all right, so we gotta, first step, we gotta go create a page. We don't put anything on that page, we just call it blog. And now we've got to go to either Customizer or somewhere else and mark that page as this magic page that shows your blog. Now we got to go somewhere else, and then we've got to add it to the menu, and poof, now you've got a listing of your blog post. I'm like, there was no way a non-technical person is just going to stumble upon this like 3-4 step process on how to do it. So going back to right at the beginning, where that there is still, I think, that conception or perception that WordPress is easy to use and spin up, you know, like, but if you've never used it before, like, there is a lot you need to learn just to spin up a basic site. And especially if you start something like local, like, oh, cool, I can do local by Flywheel or MAMP or whatever. And there's my site. All right, I want to put this live. Wait a minute. You've got to transfer the data.
You don't just like collect the files and then drag them to the other folder? No,
not anymore. You got to use front page for that. That's what
it's like a database and stuff. Jeez. Yeah, just to think the legions of cat blogs that are out there that have a blog button on their site that doesn't actually go anywhere. You know, I mean, there's these little tricks that happen that you have to do in WordPress to be able to pull off the very basic things. And unless you're telling, you know, if the user is being instructed like with some type of wizard that pops up at the beginning saying, oh, is this a blog or is this a website? Like, what do you want to do here? Do you want this to do this or do you want it to do that? Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I would really love to see is when you download a theme from Theme Forest or anything else like that, like some sort of, nameless, ecosystem where there are WordPress themes available.
You already named it. It's too late. Cannot be unnamed.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean. But when you install the theme, the demo content automatically goes in to actually make the design look like it did in that shiny website that you're like, yes, that's the theme I want.
Yep.
Because that extra step of installing the importer and then importing the thing, and then maybe the thing didn't quite work, so you have to rerun it, and then suddenly you've got duplicate content and you don't know what to do.
Yep.
Especially if you're trying to use that theme on an existing website and then the imported stuff managed to like paste over a bunch of your content.
Or emails everyone on your Jetpack list the demo content, which has happened a few times to people I've been on. I'm like, so I know what happened here, but just so you know, I got 10 emails, and so did everyone else on your list.
But I did get to see what your H1, H2, and H3 looks like now. I mean,
yeah,
that looks great.
Well, that's also why you don't do live updates.
Yep.
On your production server, right?
Yep.
That's why you never do that.
I don't understand. I thought you tested everything and developed in production. Like, man, no one is gonna buy my courses or anything now. They're like, who is this joker?
Now I have no reason to wear the cowboy hat when I cowboy code.
Yes. So actually wrapping back to the whole having a wizard, right? Like there's that box that shows up right when you first do it. That's all like, dismiss, but add your first blog post, add your first whatever. And then people will use that as their like main tool to do stuff. And then they accidentally click dismiss and bad things happen. So yeah, I don't know if a wizard would necessarily do it. It's almost like a huge rethink of the entire WordPress, but yeah.
It'd be cool if it was an actual wizard.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It
like
would
a
be
real life person who's like doing it.
Yeah, like pointy hat, starry robe,
Done.
staff, the whole nine.
That'd be cool.
So there actually has been some work towards a better new user experience. I don't know where they are with that project, but I do know that they are trying to be a little more mindful of that. I think that there's a realization that out of the box, it's not just this easy thing. Like, sure, 5-minute install like makes it sound easy, but okay, now what? You've got it installed on your server. Now what do you do? Like having something like that. I know that there are hosts that are trying to have a new user experience. I think GoDaddy has a little added like salt and pepper over the top of like a new install.
The Salt Bay of WordPress.
Yeah. So to get back on like some misconceptions, I think that something that Brian kind of brought up earlier is like 11 jillion D plugins on a site, and how that could possibly be poor for some
just
users.
Possibly. I mean, you never know.
Possibly.
It might be okay.
Yeah, if you're running a ton of plugins, it can be bad, but in a lot of cases, it's the quality of the plugins that really is the thing. So like if you're running, I've seen sites running like 60 plugins, and I cringe. But
I love that deep breath that you had to do, right? Like, yeah. A nightmare.
And it's something that like I kind of have to deal with, because like you see a site running a ton of plugins, and you're like, well, it's on PHP 7.1. It's running quickly. It's not throwing any errors. It's not doing like all of this functionality is functionality that the customer wants. Like the site is performing well. You can see like, okay, if you don't want like this functionality and this functionality, maybe you can get rid of these plugins and it'll make things just a little bit faster. But if a user has gone through and found good plugins for their site, you know, it doesn't matter if they're running 60 of them or, you know, 5 of them. You could find 5 of the worst plugins and have the worst time
You
with
can find
WordPress.
one of the worst plugins, right? Like, yeah. You're right. And a plugin could be 2 lines of code. Like, it doesn't need to be this huge thing.
Or deep sigh 60 plugins and have it run great.
Yep.
It just all depends.
For sure.
That's definitely a misconception that people have about that, especially or the other one is this theme doesn't have enough functionality in it. You know, it's like, oh, I really need to, you know, I wanted to have this theme that does it makes Facebook. It just spits out a Facebook and it needs to do all the stuff. And you know, now I have to upgrade a plugin. And the plugin's baked into the theme. Now what are you going to do? You know, there's a bunch of those sorts of functionality type things. You know, you want to have a theme that has the least amount of functionality in there and allow it to just do the presentation side of it, and then have all the plugins and whatnot tie into them. So
that's a good misconception, is the theme authors that think that including a plugin in their theme instead of actually putting it into the plugins directory where it needs to be upgraded. Revolution slider.
You got a little cough there.
Yeah. Oh, I normally have a button to mute what I'm saying or mute coughing. But
wait till the next slide goes by. Once the next slide goes by, it'll be all right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, there are some functionality that people have written that allow you to install the prerequisite plugins that you need in order to be able to use the theme in a way that the theme designer you know, wanted it to do, or they just go, hey, this works with this slider thing, and this other slider thing, and these 4 other, you know, form plugins or something. It has the correct stylings and everything already built. That's great. Find something like that. But the ones where they just like hard code all their stuff in there, it's like, oh, but don't worry, PayPal, we got PayPal covered. PayPal is built into our theme. Oh no, don't do that.
and then they have 2 years down the line, they have a 3-year-old PayPal library, PHP library in there, and haven't updated anything.
Yep. I see this a lot with YouTube themes, where you'll have a theme that has the YouTube API stuff's all built into the theme, and you're like, oh, that's great. You know, you just put in your key and you're good to go, or you log into YouTube and it pulls in all your videos and stuff. That's going to work for about a week.
Be great. I guess it would work well if the theme author indefinitely supported it, but which I guess could happen with plugins too, right? You could have a YouTube API plugin and it stops working. So.
Right, but instead of having to change just a plugin, you have to change a whole theme. That becomes
way more
a massive headache. And I kind of get where theme developers are coming from, where they're trying to do the whole decisions not options thing. But on the same hand, like in that case, options might be better.
Yeah. Here's actually just thought of a misconception. So one that a lot of people will come to the WordPress meetup because they think they need to use WordPress to say, I don't know, sell their book or sell their photos, you know, or something like that. And I'll actively tell them like, no, you know, you're just starting. You're good with the default. Set up Shopify, set up, you know, something else that, you know, they can maintain it. You just type in your credit card and put in the website URL you want and you're done. So yeah, that might be, I think that's, you know, with the advent of Squarespace and Wix, that's becoming less of a thing. But yeah, just a lot of people thinking they need WordPress or they just hear the word WordPress and they're just stuck on that, but lose sight of the actual goal.
Right, that it might not actually be the thing that they need.
Yeah. They just, what is your goal? You want to sell your thing. Okay, cool. you could set it up on eBay or you could whatever, you know, you don't even need your own website necessarily.
Yeah. It's true.
I guess another one would be that if you're trying to do a site that has a social media, you know, some type of social media groups type thing or something into it, and you also want to sell clothing, but then you also want to do this other thing, having like all of those under that, you know, and the plugins aren't coded correctly. So they're not like isolating stuff based on the type of thing that's happening on the site. You could essentially have all of the code running on the social media part of the site that's being used to be able to sell the stuff that shows up on, you know, that you're trying to sell on the site, that also does all your video playing stuff all at the same time. So now you've just complicated everything because you threw all these things into one basket.
It's like a marketing problem, less than a WordPress problem.
Exactly. Like, don't put that much functionality all into one single WordPress install. I mean, either break stuff up, or like you were talking about Square, you know, using something like Shopify. You can have your blog on your website, use your blog on your website, and then use Shopify on the, you know, on a secondary piece to it, and jump between the two of them or something.
Yep. Exactly.
The best and the worst thing about WordPress is it can be anything you want it to be.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of like, how long is a piece of string?
You have to hear that all the time, though, Sarah, in the designer meetup, where you have folks that maybe aren't very tech savvy, but they're very design savvy, and now they're wanting to build a website. I mean, you have to come across that quite a bit in your meetup, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to one person who had for a website, and I'm like, okay, well, talk to me a little bit about what you're trying to do here. And they're like, well, I wanted to do this, this, and this, and this, and then it does this other thing. I'm like, that makes perfect sense to me. And I've got a number of developers that I can recommend that would help you. Press. So can it just do it? I'm like, well, it can do it. Somebody has to create that solution for you.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
That recipe may require a little, not just pouring a few things in there, but also like actually, having somebody who knows what they're doing to cook it.
Yeah. That comes up all the time.
Yeah. I mean, after, what is this now? 15 years of WordPress this year?
Mm-hmm.
The chances are really good that, if you have an idea for something, somebody's probably made a plugin to do it. If that plugin only covers 80% and, the main part of the functionality you need is that mystery 20%, it actually makes more sense most of the time to make a new plugin and not use the existing software.
That's why I added a custom template functionality to my shortcode plugin, because it's like you can add so many options that change the order and add this and add that. But at the end of the day, most of the time, it's like, oh, I want it exactly here, and I want this to have this size font. I'm like, yeah, what? Create your own template. Here's how. Have fun. Yeah,
because with early adopters, I think they're much more used to the idea that, oh, I'm going to be working with something that's not quite perfect yet.
Yeah.
And at this point, people are like, no, like, I want this to be my vision. Why isn't it my vision?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, my plugin's perfect, but yeah, I can understand other ones being less so. Yeah, I mean, like, come on.
I would never do the same.
I'll pretend that I did not hear you say "uh-oh" when I started talking about Tide.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It was Tide Pod, so you're fine.
Wait, is this recorded? Yeah.
How did all these people get in my living room?
Awesome. Well, folks, thank you very much for hanging out with us and talking a little bit about WordPress, all the myths and misconceptions and everything that happens with WordPress. So thank you very much for being on the show, hanging out with us and talking all about that. You can go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com. You can click on the links there to subscribe. If you're interested in subscribing to this content, we have a bunch of ways to do it. Go over to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. That's where you could find all the information there. Show notes and everything else will be up on the website. Feel free to go take a look at all the links and all the things that we're talking about. And that's about it. Talk to you all later. You have a good rest of your day.
Bye.